This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community, working in legislative, regulatory, and political arenas to promote the free enterprise system. Information at vachamber.com. Virginia hospitals and health systems provide jobs. They support our economy and promote public health. Local hospitals are always open to help people with unexpected health needs. Having a stable healthcare network is vital. Virginia hospitals are our lifeline.
It's amazing what my students with special needs can accomplish. Their pride is priceless. That's why I teach.
Brought to you by the Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.
Welcome to This Week in Richmond, and special welcome to Senator John Edwards.
Thank you, David.
Appreciate your being on.
Glad to
Tell
be
our
here.
viewers that we're having a conversation just a few days before crossover. They're now seeing the show.
That's right.
Right after crossover, each chamber's had to finish its own bills. The budget's still being worked on,
It
even
is.
as the
That's
viewers are seeing the program,
right.
because there's a later deadline on the budget bill. So, how about telling the folks around the Commonwealth the issues that you've really been focusing a lot of your time and energy
Sure.
on this
Yeah.
session?
Well, I thought the governor's budget for education was really quite good. You know, since 2008, we're still not out of the recession. Teachers are still getting paid something like $6,000 on average lower than the national average. And so we're hoping to improve that. The governor's budget does a lot to go forward with that. 2,500 new teachers, we were like 5,000 short or so. And so 2,500 new teachers plus 2% salary increase over the biennium. So it's a good budget on public education. You know, when it comes to higher education, another good budget. There's about $1 billion for both public and higher education over the biennium in terms of operating expenses, so that should help a lot. In terms of the capital funding, the governor has a bond package he's proposing, over $1 billion for buildings, for about $850 million or so for the higher educational institutions, the four-year institutions, another $200+ million for the public school, for the buildings for the community colleges. So about $1 billion bond package, so I hope that passes. So it's an aggressive budget for public and higher education, and it's something that's surely needed.
And you've put in some budget amendments, too, that pertain to education.
I have one, for example, preschool, to expand preschool to all those children who are on free or reduced lunch program, which are by definition poor kids. The governor has a significant increase also in preschool. As you know, I've been pushing preschool for a long time. We even had a bill this year to move forward to universal preschool at the option of the parents by 2021. So we're looking at making sure our children at the preschool level get everything they need. You know, more and more people are recognizing the importance of preschool. In fact, the Minnesota Federal Reserve System and the president or the head of the company that owns the Newport News Shipbuilding and Dry Docks pointed out how this is the most important thing we can do for the economy in the future is preschool, because we know from studying in early nurturing and early education of our children that they learn so much, and so many of their attitudes and values are fixed before they're 5 years old. And children that get preschool do better in school later. They do better in life. They do better in terms of success in their occupation or profession. They are not as involved in the criminal justice system. So we need to focus more and more on preschool. I think this is one of the most important things we can do.
And thinking about public education, I think a budget amendment about some free and reduced lunch,
Yeah,
some
that's
additional
right.
money.
That's right. We need to do, in fact, the governor and his wife have been promoting the importance
Yes.
of more and more children getting free and reduced lunch because they have to be ready to learn. When they come to school and they haven't had breakfast, for example, they don't learn. So children need to have proper nutrition. And the governor's wife, Dorothy, has done a wonderful job with the First Lady with regard to promoting nutrition.
You know, one of the other issues that was around last session, it's back this session, and no doubt maybe around in 2017, the SOLs.
That's
And
right. Well, last year we got rid of 5 of the SOLs. I and others have put in a bill to basically abolish the SOLs, except for what the federal government requires. The problem with the SOLs, and I've never been a fan of the SOLs, it tends to crowd out electives, which are also very important. Teachers tend to teach to the test, and the stress it puts on the children is enormous. I haven't found too many people really like them. I spoke to Boise State last June, and I asked the several cities that I spoke to, these were rising seniors in high school, how many liked them? None of them. And I said, how many hate the SOLs? They all raised their hand. And I mean, parents don't like it, children don't like it, the teachers don't like it, the principals don't like it. So it's time we kind of move forward. And again, the problem with the SOLs, it tends to promote memorization rather than creative, innovative thinking.
you know, I think most of our viewers know, but some may not, is that Virginia has its own test. The federal government requires a certain number, and then they're not all the same. So that's really caused for a proliferation of those.
That's right. And the governor came to Roanoke last year and had 6 of the children from age 7th grade through 12th grade, brilliant, really smart kids that came in and explained in detail why they didn't like the SOLs, why they're really inappropriate. And so I'm hoping we can move forward to do something else.
You know, one of your colleagues had a bill, I think, that seems to be moving through this year to require some physical education to be provided for children. Because instead of people talk about those tests, they sit there and take those tests a long time, but there's no requirement to date that in the lower grades that they have some get up and move and have some physical.
That's right. It's very important for kids to get education, whether it's just moving around for a half an hour or so. And I've been promoting also physical education. I think sports are very important. They teach values as well, and discipline, and nutrition. It goes along with that. So the more we can teach children to be good citizens, but also to be healthy citizens. And you know, the Greeks had the idea of the mind and body working together.
Right.
And you have to have a strong mind and a strong body. And so I think physical education is very important.
You know, transportation is always a hot subject here around the Capitol, and for anyone stuck in traffic, it's always hot too. Part of what you focused on last year and continue to work on is some passenger rail.
That's exactly right. We're bringing Amtrak to Roanoke in less than 18 months. Then to the Christiansburg, hopefully by 2020. I've been working hard on that. I think we can do it. It's, as I say, on board and on track to be successful. People in the Roanoke area are very excited about the idea of bringing Amtrak to be on the northeast corridor of Amtrak, starting in the Roanoke New River Valley area, is really going to be a huge boon to our region to go from, say, get on the Amtrak in Roanoke, same seat service all the way to Washington, New York, Boston. That's a big deal, and it's going to attract tourists, it's going to attract business, tremendous convenience for people, especially if you're trying to drive up to Washington, New York, that area. It's the congestion, especially past Washington, D.C., is enormous. So being on Amtrak, I think, will be a huge benefit. And also in the Richmond area, they've started a new train, you know, from Norfolk to Richmond, and the Amtrak train had always gone from Richmond north, but the Norfolk train, I think, is very important too.
You know, many of our friends, your friends and mine and others here in the Richmond area and up Northern Virginia, if they're going to New York City, they usually say, well, the train's going to be a much more enjoyable, relaxing, and reliable way.
So much better. Kathy, my wife, and I, during the Christmas holidays, went to New York on Amtrak and had a wonderful time. I mean, it's just terrific. We now have a connector bus. I got funding for that 4 years ago to go from the Roanoke area to Lynchburg, where Amtrak starts. And 5:45 in the morning, you hop on the bus, and you're in New York by 3:30 in the afternoon. So it's really tremendous, great convenience for everybody.
Now, what about any other issues you're working on? I know that there was some effort on human trafficking
That's right.
issues.
I've been promoting legislation on human trafficking. There's so many, it's a national problem and an international problem. It's really a form of modern slavery, really. These typically young people who may be homeless, they may be runaways, they may be without any family connections or financial connections. Somebody promises them something, and they end up in a form of commercial prostitution, and they're really victims. And so and there are more and more people looking at how can we deal with this problem. It's, first of all, we beefed up the laws on human trafficking last year, and this year I've got legislation passed to provide more services to the victims. Children, for example, if they're caught in prostitution, and if they can cooperate, and often that means telling what happened to them and going after the people that put them into that terrible situation, but allowing the juvenile courts to contact the Department of Social Services to file a petition for a child in need of services at the social services level. And so that passed the Senate. I hope it'll pass the House. So we're trying to do more and more to help the victims of human trafficking, which is a very, very serious problem, and it's a growing problem.
Guns have been big issues for years, and some of the breaking news this year was some compromise that was worked out. And I know an issue that you've been involved in.
Well, I've told people, given the nature of my district, I'm in a position to help form a compromise, and we did this year with the governor's help, the attorney general's help, with people on both sides on this issue. I've had a bill to provide for voluntary background checks at gun shows with the state police there doing the voluntary background checks from individual sales. Dealers, of course, have to do background checks by federal law. Individuals selling to an individual don't have to, but now with the state police being present at a gun show on a voluntary basis, they can do a background checks, and the people I've talked to would like to have this opportunity. So that's one of the bills. Senator Howell had a bill on when there's a protective order in a domestic situation that the person shouldn't have a gun. And then, of course, we had a reform of what the Attorney General did with regard to concealed weapon permits and working with other states. So I think this is a good compromise. The people on both sides may not be happy with it, the people, extremists on both sides.
Yes.
But those in the middle, I think, realize this is an important step forward. I'm proud of the governor for getting into this, and his leadership made a huge difference in coming up with this compromise, and I was glad to be part of this compromise.
Well, Senator Edwards, some of those bills still have a way to go, but evidently the agreement's been made, and thank you very much for being on This Week in Richmond and helping to bring these issues to the people of the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Thank you, David. I appreciate it.
I'd like to welcome Senator Tom Garrett back to This Week in Richmond. I appreciate your being on with us again. It's been a while, and we appreciate your being on. And we'll remind our viewers we're having this conversation a few days before crossover. They're seeing the show after things have crossed over. But you've been working on a wide variety of issues during the session, and start with any one of them, and let's get as many in as we can in the next 12 minutes.
Well, there's always, I think the preeminent issue at state level is always jobs and the economy, particularly right now. We've had flat growth economically, and one thing that frustrates me is in spite of that, we've gone from a $97 billion biennial budget to $1.9 or $109 billion in the biennial budget, plus about 2.5 plus or minus billion bonded. And so I think it flummoxes some of the taxpayers and some of the people down here how we can have a 15% overall expenditure growth in a 2-year period, which has been primarily flat as it relates to economic development. So there are a number of workforce bills that we've gotten out, some that I worked on. Senator Ruff's got a good one, wherein we have our community colleges try to reach out to the surrounding areas, and the surrounding areas reach out to the community colleges and say, hey, here are the high demand fields. That's something I think that's been good and really bipartisan that's happened this session. Any number of other more politicized issues, a lot of things with the Second Amendment, sort of radiating outward from the Attorney General's office. Some interesting cooperation and partnerships formed, and it's been an interesting session. Obviously, looking forward a little bit further, it's a budget year.
Yeah.
So things are going to get interesting.
Right. Your comments about the community college remind me of a lifetime ago. I taught in one up in Shenandoah Valley, and they were really reaching out at that point in time. Started an automotive school, started a mental health technician program because of nearby hospitals.
Sure.
And there's really a need to continue to do that, reaching out, because the jobs are changing.
Absolutely, and I'm blessed, I think, in that my district has interaction with CVCC, PVCC, and J. Sargent Reynolds, the way it lays.
Oh, you have three in there.
And yeah, and in fact, I think all of them have campuses or extension campuses. But what's going on, and I think Lynchburg and Campbell and Bedford, those areas are really illustrative of some of the good things, is we got some pretty good employers, but they need very specific labor skills. And so when the communication exists, hey, everybody wins. Those employers get the workers they need, and the young people in the community get opportunities to have good lifetime type careers. So,
one of your bills, and I happened to be sitting in committee watching it, that maybe didn't make the headlines, but was really, I think, an important bill. That was about adoption leave for state employees.
Sure. Really, really proud of that bill, and I think we're good this year. What it says is where a family adopts a child under the age of 1, that adoptive parent, usually a mother, will be able to take essentially maternity leave. All the science says that bonding with a very young child is incredibly important in the development of that child. And if adoption is something that we want to promote as a government, as a society, it makes sense to me to parallel the leave structure, allow people to have a little bit of paid time, and to be better mothers and fathers. So it's common sense. And there was a big delta in the code as it related to what privileges you had if you were a natural birth parent or if you adopted. So hopefully that'll help some young people and help some families.
And while that really applies to state employees, hopefully those of us in the private sector would work out something like that too.
It's funny because there's a massive goal for the private sector wherein you have paid leave that's even greater in some instances and none at all in others. But what we do here is start a conversation sometimes that I think moves the needle.
Right. One of your colleagues on the committee that day said, what about the men? And I think you were able to point out that it's really neutral. If both people are working for the state, one of them can take the leave.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's a tough decision for families, but ultimately there's a balancing act in a lot of things we do between stewardship, that is responsible use of other people's money because we didn't generate it, and between public policy. And I think we've struck that here. Gosh knows we've moved the needle towards helping families just get off on the right foot. And again, I don't understand development before the age of 1, but there are people who study, and this is a big deal.
Right. Oftentimes on the floor of the Senate, you make comments about being a freedom-loving person, and I think one of your bills, and one that's been around, comes around at different times, has to do with helmets when you're riding motorcycles.
Sure, yeah, okay, so the Jeffersonian theory is that your liberty stops where mine starts. So the counter-argument is if you don't wear a motorcycle helmet, my insurance premiums could go up, therefore your decision impacts me. What we've got is a situation where an insurer in their contract with the insured could say, will you or will you not, and then they can adjust the individual's rate up. There is all sorts of data, truly, that says that you're in as much danger with the helmet as without, because you suffer a different type of injury. That is, when you put a couple pounds on your head and physics comes into play with inertia. So why is the government dictating to women and men in the Commonwealth what they must do when another is not impacted by their decisions? And that's just kind of the core we start from, natural law and where rights derive from. We don't give rights in government. We can protect them or erode them. And so that bill may, and I'll tell you what else, David, 31 states have.
I was wondering about that number.
Yeah, and it goes up every year. And it's a massive tourism revenue generator because cyclists really like to do the weekend ride. I have a friend who flew to Chicago, rented bikes with his wife, and they rode 66 all the way to New Mexico. They drove around Missouri because it was the only helmet law state. Now, how many hotel nights is that? How many restaurants is that? How many tanks of gas is that? But at the genesis of it, it's about letting people make decisions. Life's dangerous. But again, the data shows a similar number of injuries of different types with or without helmets. Let people make decisions for themselves.
One of the other bills that, and I don't know how many years you've worked on this, but that seems to be moving this year has to do with those who are being homeschooled being able to participate. And I'm not sure all the details of that, but it seems like that issue is moving forward.
So much misinformation. Yeah, we've gotten that bill out of the Senate. We've carried it 3 of the last 5 years, 2 under Governor McDonnell, and then skip 2. And I think in the presidential election year, maybe the governor will have a different feeling about it when he gets to his desk, because the homeschool community is very active, very organized. Here's some of the things that people don't understand. Right now, homeschool students can use facilities, science labs, gyms, theaters in our schools. What this bill would do is allow the localities to decide the extent on official athletic teams that the young people could participate. It allows them to be subject to the same disciplinary rules. It means that they must have been homeschooled for 2 prior years so that we don't have a kid drop out and then go shop for a different team. It allows the coach the latitude to say, sorry, son, you didn't make the team. But we call it, it used to be the Tebow bill. I call it the Equal Access bill. Here's what galls me about that. The argument against is this: well, these people are different, or these people don't belong here, or it's 2016. The these people argument is, gosh, I hope it's behind us. Is this 1930s Nazi Germany? Is this 1950s segregationist South? These kids are kids, and so people say, well, there was a decision made. The decision was made by the parents. So the children shouldn't suffer because the decision was made by the parents that this homeschool route was in their best interest. Let the kids play ball. And we're going to take that to the governor's desk. I feel good. It's the right thing to do. I don't see why we're blocking off people because of a different religious or value set in this country in this day and age.
And if I think I heard you say it, that it really goes then, if it goes through and becomes law, the local school board, the local school system has some choice.
Yes, sir.
And then I think I also maybe in the debate heard that the coach would have some choice.
Well, with any team.
Wouldn't have to say, well, I want David or Tom or Joe or Jane or somebody on the team.
Right. They did this in Louisiana, and the first year, 43 kids in the state made varsity athletic teams. So the impact's not going to be huge. But, we have, particularly in sports like soccer, where there's a great youth pipeline, baseball, softball, wrestling, you got kids that run into a wall of not being able to participate. And, athletics did a lot. Looking at me now, you wouldn't know. Did a lot for me growing up. And these are opportunities, again, that I think young people should be able to access equally, just regardless of what their parents' feeling are as to where they're best educated. So there are so many safeguards in here to ensure academic progress and leave the latitude of the locality. It's the right thing to do. And again, with this, we're at 29 states. 13 of the top 15 states in high school educational attainment have some form of this. Virginia would make 14. I love being a Virginian. I'm proud to be a Virginian, but we do tend to cling to the way we've always done things, and sometimes it's bad.
Before it times out, what about any other issues that you're working on or that you see the General Assembly working on in the closing weeks?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, thank you. We had a bill this year that would withdraw state funding from cities, counties, towns that declare themselves sanctuary cities. It's not, if I were looking for opportunity for my family, I'd go where that opportunity existed. The fault lies at the feet of the federal government, where they keep laws on the books and they won't enforce them. And then the problem is always handed down to the states and the localities. Same thing with cannabinoid oils, marijuana for reducing seizures in children, where there's proven data that says it can help, but it's a Schedule I controlled substance, so we can't dispense it in Virginia. And the same thing is federal law is stopping us from making good policy at the state level. So I want to push back against the feds for their overreach and their short-sightedness and their fear to tackle tough issues, whether it's enforcing immigration, whether it's recognizing that there might be medical uses for what heretofore was thought to be only a negative. The feds need to move, and we need to be the ones telling them in a federalist structure.
Sounds like there's going to be some excitement before the session ends, and whether, as you said before, whether it's the budget or whether it's other matters. And Senator Garrett, we very much appreciate your being on This Week in Richmond, and look forward to talking with you again in the future.
David, God bless. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
This Week in Richmond is made possible in part by Dignity Memorial, caring for our communities with a network of funeral homes and cemeteries in Virginia and throughout North America. More information about Dignity Memorial's providers is online at dignitymemorial.com. The Virginia Chamber of Commerce, the voice of the Virginia business community. For jobs, the economy, and public health, Virginia Hospitals, our lifeline.
The Virginia Education Association, because a good education is good for everybody.
Additional support is provided by these sponsors. And by the members of Virginia's public television stations. Thank you.